The morning sun crawled lazily over the dusty horizon of the small village, where dreams dried faster than the earth after rain. 19-year-old Amina stood by the mud-brick wall of her father's courtyard, fingers clutching the edge of her faded veil, her heart heavy with the sound of wedding drums echoing faintly from the neighbor's house. She wasn't smiling. She couldn't. Her marriage had been arranged months ago, and today her life would no longer be her own. The air smelled of turmeric, dried flowers, and dust, a scent that would forever remind her of this day when she was given away, not with love, but with duty. Her mother's eyes were red and swollen, not from joy, but from silent grief that no one dared speak of. "He is a good man," her father had said. "He is poor, yes, but kind, hard-working. He will feed you, protect you. What more does a woman need?" But Amina had never met him, this man who would call her his wife before the sun set. She had only heard whispers that he worked the fields alone after his parents' deaths, that his small home sat beyond the river, surrounded by wheat fields and silence. A farmer with a scar across his left cheek, they said, a man who rarely smiled. The wedding was simple, too simple. No music, no bright lights, no guests from faraway towns. Only the mullah, a few neighbors, and the sound of rustling leaves carried by a dry wind. Amina's hands trembled when the vows were spoken. Her heart beat so loudly she could barely hear her own voice as she said, "I accept." The old mullah smiled faintly, muttering prayers. And just like that, she was no longer her father's daughter. She was a wife to a stranger. When the ceremony ended, Amina's new husband, Rahim, stood quietly beside her. He didn't meet her eyes at first. He looked uncomfortable in his clean but worn kurta, his hands rough from labor, his skin darkened by years of sun. There was something solemn about him, something that made her both afraid and curious. When their eyes finally met, his were not cruel, nor cold, just tired. Amina didn't know what that meant then, but she would soon learn. The ox cart ride to her new home was long and silent. The road stretched endlessly, and the sky burned orange as the sun began to set. Rahim said nothing. He only guided the cart steadily, his eyes fixed ahead. Amina clutched the small bundle of clothes her mother had packed for her, feeling the ache of separation sink into her chest like a stone. She wanted to cry, but held it back, her mother's last words echoing in her mind. "Be patient, my child. Life is kinder to those who endure." When they reached his home, Amina saw a small, weathered house of clay and straw, its roof patched with tin. A cow stood tied near the door, and chickens pecked at the ground. It wasn't much, but it was clean. Inside, there were only 2 rooms, one for sleeping, one for cooking. She looked around, expecting Rahim to speak, to say something, anything, but he remained quiet. Then, as the last rays of sunlight faded, he finally turned to her. "You must be tired," he said softly. His voice surprised her. It wasn't harsh or commanding. It carried a strange gentleness. "You can rest inside. I'll bring water." Amina nodded, unsure how to respond. She sat on the edge of the small charpoy bed, watching as he stepped outside into the darkness. Her heart raced. She didn't know what to expect. Her mother had told her that the first night after marriage was a wife's greatest test, that it would define everything that followed. Fear knotted her stomach. Would he touch her? Would he hurt her? She didn't know. Minutes later, Rahim returned with a clay pot of water and placed it on the floor beside her. Then he did something that startled her completely. He knelt down, untied his sandals, and quietly spread his thin blanket on the floor beside the door. Amina blinked, confused. You're not sleeping here?" she asked timidly. He looked up, meeting her gaze for the first time with calm honesty. "You've been married off against your will," he said quietly. "I know you didn't choose this. You don't even know me. Tonight, you'll sleep in peace. I'll sleep here." Tears burned her eyes. She didn't know how to respond. No man had ever spoken to her with such understanding. She had expected indifference, or worse. But what she saw in his eyes was compassion. She turned away quickly, covering her face with her veil, but it couldn't hide her trembling. Rahim lay down on the floor, his back to her, staring at the ceiling. "I'll not force you into anything," he continued, his voice steady. "I don't want fear between us. Only honesty. When you're ready to talk, I'll listen. Until then, rest." Outside, the wind howled softly through the trees. Amina sat frozen on the bed, tears falling silently as she realized the truth. This poor farmer, whom everyone pitied, had more dignity in him than the men who claimed to be noble. That night, she didn't sleep. She watched the flicker of the lantern, the rise and fall of Rahim's breathing, and the shadow of the roof beams above. In her heart, something shifted, a quiet gratitude, unfamiliar and deep. As dawn broke, and the first light crept through the cracks in the wall, Amina finally closed her eyes. Her fear had softened into calm. Somewhere in her heart, she knew this was not the end of her life. Perhaps it was the beginning of something she had never known: respect.